Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Besiege Bots tutorials. In this episode, we will put your newly acquired motor knowledge to use by building our first vertical spinner robot in the lightweights category. Next episode, we'll also do a horizontal spinner, so stay tuned for that. Without further ado, let's get into it. Usually, when we build spinners, I personally like to start with the motor itself, and then the spinner, and then building the chassis around it. So let's start with the motor. And for that, we'll probably use the same motor that we learned last time, which is a torqueless motor with two F6 mounts acting as bearings. So again, we flip the spin blocks in. Let's turn kaleidoscope on. And we rotate it 45 degrees. That's the F6 mount. Let's turn the spin block to free spinning and put the motor down. Again, make sure the motor can only connect to the log and throw on some braces. Personally, I would recommend 4 braces per motor for a vertical spinner like this. Any more, you will get diminishing returns. So you can see I duplicated it. It's 4 braces on one side. Let's put the wood block down as well, going to the chassis. Stretch it out as much as it will go. Turn the joints viewer on. Here we go. And since we are building a robot for the lightweights category, we probably want 2 wood blocks for more reinforcement. You can get away with 1 in beta weights, but lightweight spinners, they hit pretty hard already, so I think 2 wood blocks per side going to the mount. And let's also move the wood blocks out as much as possible without hitting the motor. This way we have a little bit more room in the middle for the spinner, which will be very nice for reliability. I think that gap looks pretty good. And now let's mirror everything over to the other side, and our motor is now finished. Next, let's build the spinner. I think for this one, let's not go for a very large spinner, so I prefer using spin blocks because spin blocks are nice and heavy, and with a smaller spinner, I think ideally we want something that is heavy so it can hit quite hard. And let's do a preliminary motor spinner diameter check. It looks like it's 5 diameter, but it will probably expand over this because it's perfectly 5 right now. So we'll probably use the speed for 6 diameter. For now, I think I'll just put it at 7. And bind it to my spinner keys. There we go. And let's get working on the chassis. For the chassis, I think it would be best to do a kind of C shape made of logs and use wing panels in the middle, maybe 2, to fill the gaps. So let's start with logs. I think from the front, we can place a log right underneath here. Make sure the wood block is connecting to it. Something like this. I think we probably want to give a little bit of clearance in front of the robot for the spinner to have some more reach. So let's rotate the entire assembly here back by 10 degrees, or maybe let's do 20. 20 might be a little bit much. Let's just do 10. 10 degrees, and we can move the log back and make sure it still connects. And you can see now there's a little bit more space in front of the robot. This will give the spinner a lot more reach. Another thing you might be noticing is the spinner is shorter than the chassis right now, that won't be a problem. That's because the spin blocks do have some stretch once they spin up, and it will probably stretch to around the same level as the ground once it gets spinning. After we finish building the chassis, we'll also tune the spinner length, so we can have the spinner length be perfect and almost hit the ground, but never actually hit the ground. Next, we can do the side of the chassis. We will do a double strong log. Give it some more spacing here, so we maximize the stretch of the connections. And now we can put it to the side of this log, and it will connect. There we go. One log at the corner, though, is not strong enough, so we'll probably reinforce this later. But for now, let's also mirror this to the other side. And that's the box frame for the chassis. Next, let's place down some wing panels. From here, I think 2 wing panels might be enough. That does look good. And let's connect to the chassis outer section with more wood blocks. That is very good. Same goes for here. Let's use 2 wood blocks per connection area. Those do reach. And probably 1 in the middle connecting the 2 sides of the robot together. You might get in the way of the spinner, so let's move this as far back as we'll go. That's still connected. A bit more. Yep. Alright. Now we can double the wood blocks over to the other side, and our chassis is mostly complete. Now let's do that reinforcement I was talking about earlier. We have a gap right here, which is perfect. We now can have some wood blocks bridge this gap. Stretch it out as much as we can so it's not clipping as much. That's a little much. One side is connected, I think this side's connected. And here we go. Because this is such an important joint, I think we could double this up as well. Have one more. Move both of them a little lower. Here we go. And copy that to the other side as well. I think we are good now for the bottom part of the chassis. And you can see I still left 2 wood blocks here. I think that should go down into the back chassis like a diagonal weapon support. For that, I think we should use 1 log, which means before that, let's flip these 2 wood blocks over so we have the primary side now facing outwards. They still connect. And this way we can have a log connect to the primary directly. And of course, let's just make sure it's the woodblock primary that's being used here. Oh yeah, also the woodblock primary is over here. So let's delete the wing panels and have them put back. And now it's the woodblock primary is doing everything. And now what we can do is angle the logs down a little bit and get it to connect to the wing panels. I think the best place to connect might be the tops of these wing panels. So let's just move one of them around. Move it inwards and downwards a little bit so that it's connecting. And here we go. Move it in a little bit so it looks better. And maybe solve this reach with angle. There we go. Everything is connected. And now let's mirror this to the other side again. And we have our weapon supports. I think what we can do also is have another piece of back chassis here. So this would be best used with a double length wood block. Bring this to the back. And we use it to link the two logs together. Like such. And now we have an extra piece of center back chassis. And just to test, let's make sure the spinner isn't hitting anything. And it is not. Which means we have the clearance. That is all good. Our block count is still pretty good. So now let's move on to building the wheels. I think we should do 4-wheel drive with a chassis that is this long. And I think we should do 2-stack to get us a little bit more speed. We use cogs on the first stack because cogs are a little bit stronger than wheels. So if the wheels get knocked off, the cogs can still drive on the ground, as well as being able to reach a little bit longer than the wheel, so your wheelbase can be a little bit larger if you're using cogs in the middle stacks. Let's also move the rear set of wheels as far back as it can go, which will further increase our wheelbase size, and also stretch out the front one to as wide as it can go, and copy it to the other side. I think the wheelbase right now might be a little bit too tall. As you can see, the spinner isn't really reaching the ground. So what we can do is we can move our wheels up. And this way, the chassis runs closer to the ground, which means we get a much, much lower center of mass, which makes our robot a lot more stable. And let's bind the drive system. Actually, let's use arrow keys. I will not use my cursed drive system for a demo bot. Oh, that's missing the key. And let's just do maximum friction, no spin up time. And have everything bound to arrow keys. And now we have driving. Obviously, the robot's a little front heavy right now, and that's intentional, because we should install a front wedge. And for the main setup of this robot, I would highly suggest using blades, because blades are very good at getting under other robots. And for a vertical spinner, you really want that wedging ability to be good. And blades can only be angled at 7.5 degrees or less, or more, sorry. So I think for this, we'll just do 8 degrees for now. And make sure the blades are at the same height as the wheels. Right now you can see the front wheel isn't exactly on the ground. So we'll move the blades up a little bit. And still a little bit more up. And something like this. That looks good. The blades are also on the ground, and all 4 wheels are on the ground. We can also stretch the blades out forwards as much as possible, giving us, again, bigger wheelbase, and also a more stretched blade will have a little bit more flex, which will make for a more durable front wedge. And here we go. All the blades are on the ground. What we can also do is the outside blades, we can move them out a little bit more, like this, maximizing the width of the wedge, which could make it wedge things a lot better. And we are pretty much at block count. So here we have it, a functional and easy to build vertical spinner. let's paint it so that none of the logs or wood blocks would snap. And you can see it drives around and it can spin and hit things. Similar to the wedge bot that Rave was showing you how to build, we should also make another setup for it for fighting horizontal spinners, because blades are pretty easily knocked off by horizontals. So we can also, of course, use plows. I think there's enough room on this to fit 2 sets of plows. So we can do that. I think that will reach. We can move everything up as well. As you can see, we moved the plows up so that it can move the wheels farther to the ground. But the wheels are not touching the ground yet, so what we can do is we can angle the plows forwards, and now the plows are on the ground and the wheels are also on the ground. Angling the plows forwards gives you a disadvantage of the plow collider now being angled up, which means it will be pretty terrible at wedging. However, because we're fighting horizontals, this is not really a factor. And in fact, this makes a bot better at fighting horizontals, because now the upper portion of the plow wedge is more angled, which will allow for better deflection of horizontal spinners. And you can see we still have some blocks. So what we can do is extend the wedge further. And for that, we can actually add on some grabber armor. Grabbers, of course, can be used in spinners because they're invincible in the spinner configuration, but they can also be used as armor to, for example, extend your wedge or protect your wheels. And here, because it's only attached to a part of the robot that's not moving, that's not part of a weapon, we do have to set it to U-grabbers, which will make them destructible, but they will still be very, very strong and be a very effective extension to the wedge. And we can paint that as well. And here we go. That's the anti-horizontal setup for this vertical spinner robot. And that's it for today. Stay tuned for next episode, where we will go over a similar process, but we will build a horizontal spinner. Thank you for watching.